glorified, few are glorified. Well, how can we glorify Him? If we turn to the example of Jesus, He set the pattern. When Jesus was before He came to the earth, He was the second in the universe, as it were. Jehovah's firstborn Son, His only begotten Son, the Word. He spoke God's Word. Whatever He said, that went. He worked with His Father in creating all things. So He knew the way things should be on the earth. And so when He came to the earth, doing His Father's will, He was a perfect man. Well, He set the pattern because when He was 30 years of age, He entered the synagogue in His hometown of Nazareth, stood up to read, which was a custom. They handed Him the scroll of Isaiah, and He read from Isaiah 61, 1 and 2. Jehovah's Spirit is upon me, because He's anointed me to declare good news to the poor, and to proclaim the year of goodwill on the part of our God. So He set about doing that from that time forward. He gained followers and disciples. He taught them to do the same work that He did, preach and teach the good news of the kingdom. He never let up in that. So He shared that privilege with His followers. He trained them how to preach. He taught them what to preach, and He assigned them a territory. They were to go at that time exclusively to the nation of Israel, no other nation. And He instructed them in order to glorify God with all they had. In John chapter 15, He gave this encouragement. In verse 8, He said, "My Father is glorified in this, that you keep bearing much fruit, and prove yourselves my disciples." He said, that's it. Keep bearing much fruit. He was talking about kingdom fruit and helping people to learn the truth that leads to life. In Peter's first letter, chapter 2, 1 Peter chapter 2, and verse 21. Jehovah knows the way we are, and He said in verse 21, in fact, to this course you were called, because even Christ suffered for you, leaving you a model or a pattern for you to follow His steps closely. Well, why did He say closely? Jesus was perfect. We're imperfect. So Jehovah wants us to do the best we possibly can. It's like, perhaps you've had the experience of trying to follow somebody's footsteps in the snow. You've got low shoes and they have boots. You do good at first, but invariably you slip and miss. Your shoe is full of snow. But do you quit? No, you keep on going. So it's the same thing. We're encouraged to follow Jesus' steps closely. We're going to fall. It's that simple. We're perfect. But get up and keep going. I'd illustrate the importance of following steps closely. In the western part of this continent is the Rocky Mountains, and there's a sheep called the bighorn sheep. They're still in existence because they stay away from men. They haven't been exterminated. Well, they're seldom seen with just the naked eye. Telescope or binoculars they're seen. Scientists study them. They say they're always small flocks. They stay in the crevices and ravines of those mountains, inaccessible by man. So they walk along these little ledges. The oldest ram leads that flock. And he's ever on the lookout for vegetation they can eat. And he'll take a nibble, move on, leave some for the ones behind him. Well, he might look across the ravine and see a nice patch of grass. That's where we'll go. Well, he knows from experience he can leap across there and safely. So he'll step up to a spot, place his feet just so, and stare across and just stand there motionless for a minute. And scientists were puzzled as to why he did that. That he leaps across and lands and stands there motionless. And he moves on, gets something to eat. Well, they observed that next sheep in line does the exact same thing. So they show others how to do it. They follow his steps closely, because missteps mean, in their case, sudden death. So that's what the Bible is encouraging us. Do the best we possibly can. Don't worry about what we can't do. If we fall, don't worry about it. Get up and keep going. And that means following Jesus closely means refusing to do things in this system of things that are the wicked world around us. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1 shows us how we can do that. Because the wicked world around us is controlled by Satan. He's the god of this system. And so people just blindly follow what he does. They go along with the crowd always. They're encouraged to do that. So here in chapter 12, verse 1, he says, consequently, I entreat you, not command, entreat, by the compassions of God, brothers, to present your bodies a sacrifice living, holy, acceptable to God, a sacred service with your power of reason. At verse 2, he goes on to say, make your mind over. So we've probably all heard that expression about you are what you feed your mind. And it's true. Whatever goes into the mind, we meditate upon it, reaches the heart. It can be good or it can be bad. Can we control bad things coming to our mind? No, the devil owns the system. We're bombarded with it. Can we control how long they stay there? It's like can you control, can you prevent a bird from landing on your head? No. But what if it builds a nest? You can control that. So wrong thoughts can come to our mind, but we can control how long they stay there. Reject them. Fill our mind with building encouraging things. And also it's vital to imitate Jesus in the way he did the ministry, not only the pattern of it, but his attitude. He's the one account there in John chapter 4. He's traveling from Judea to Galilee. And he comes by a Samaritan city, and he's hungry, and he sends his disciples into the city to get foodstuffs. Tired and hungry, so he didn't lay down under a shade tree. He sat down by Jacob's well. Why? He knew that somebody would come there to get water. So he would still have the opportunity to share the good news. So I always liked that, how quick he got the woman's attention. He said, could I have a drink of water? Two reasons why it got her attention. Men never spoke to women in public, and she was a Samaritan, and Jews had no dealings with Samaritans. So that got her attention instantly. And from there, he was able to share the good news with her. She goes into the city, tells the people, might this be the Messiah? They went out, and the account concludes with the fact that many of them became believers because of that. So the point is, we never know the effect we'll have on other people. Share the good news at every opportunity, whether it be the door-to-door ministry, informal witnessing, or on the job, or whatever. If it's on the job, then we need to share it briefly so we're not stealing time. So this is some of the ways that how we glorify Him with all that we have. What do we have? Remember Jesus said, if you want to build a tower or a house or anything else, count the cost. So in Luke chapter 21 gives us the example of counting the cost and using what we have. Here Jesus is standing in front of the temple with his disciples, and he observed rich people, first of all, verse 1, dropping money into the contribution box. And being rich, they probably were dropping large sums of money in. But verse 2 says, he saw a certain needy widow drop 2 small coins of very little value there. And he said, I tell you truthfully, this widow, although poor, dropped in more than they all did. Imagine that, take all the money the rich people dropped in, add it up, those 2 little coins were worth more. How could it possibly be? In verse 4 he said, these dropped in gifts out of their surplus. But this woman, out of her want, dropped in all the means of living she had. Well, how was she able to do that? She had a close personal relationship with Jehovah. She knew that if she put the kingdom first and kept it there, Jehovah would help her provide for her needs. But by comparison, the wealthy were dropping in all that money. She dropped in everything she had. So that was the point. Jesus says, use what you have. Glorify God with all that we have. That's the encouragement we have. So that's the example set by us. So it's a principle. It's not what we might be able to acquire. Because sometimes brothers get caught up in, well, if I do this, that, or the other thing, I'll be able to get more money. And Jehovah wants us to use what we have in our circumstances. Excuse me. That's the important thing. And we all have different circumstances, that's true. Some have talent, some have education, some have youth, some have experience. Some are single. Some have material things. Some have difficult circumstances. Let's consider a difficult circumstance. We could prevent the difficult circumstance from, we could allow that circumstance to prevent us from serving Jehovah with all we have. But here's a young man in a South American country who learned the truth, 17 years of age, and he became an unbaptized publisher. Well, he wanted to get baptized, and he did. So the first month he was unbaptized publisher, he was spending 19 hours a month in the field service. The first month he auxiliary pioneered, he spent 63 hours in the ministry. The brothers there dubbed him four-wheel drive because he can be seen going up and down the hills in the South American country on crutches. He didn't allow that difficult circumstance to prevent him from serving Jehovah. So he used what he had. So that's the point with us. Are we using what we have and all we have? We look at, there are many people today who learn the truth, highly successful actors, musicians, sports personalities, engineers, but they show by putting the kingdom interest first in their life that that's more important to them than the things they want to do, enjoy doing. You've probably heard of Sly and the Family Stones, rock group. I think it was the 80s, 90s. I don't know if they're still in existence or not. I haven't listened to rock. I just knew this and read it in the way. But anyway, the lead guitarist, he really loved playing the guitar and being with the band. But him and his wife accepted a Bible study, and in their case, it took quite some time for them to learn the truth. But eventually they learned it. And they wanted to use what they had to serve Jehovah. They wanted a regular pioneer. They said, this traveling with the band is not the way to pioneer. So while he loved playing the guitar with the band, he quit the band, and he and his wife both started regular pioneering. He had 2 children to support. How did he do that? He gives guitar lessons. So he still gets to play the guitar, not with the band. There are many other individuals who do things like serving at Bethel or construction work that needs to be done. And we need to ask ourselves, what am I doing in my circumstances? There's 2 things about circumstances. They will change by themselves, but you don't know how they're going to change that. Or we can work and change them in a certain direction. Remember, according to that illustration in Luke, Jesus observing those people, Jehovah wants us to serve him whole soul with what we have, not with what we can acquire. So we need to examine ourselves prayerfully. Am I doing all I possibly can in my circumstance? We need to set personal goals to reach that. I recall when I was auxiliary pioneering continuous, and I told the circuit overseer I want the regular pioneer. He said, what stands your way? I said, I don't have a job. He said, what are you doing now? Working full time? I said, no, 4 days. He said, that's full time. He said, if you want a pioneer, set the date, fill out the application, and quit your job, and Jehovah will give you one. Here's the shoehorn, put the shoe on. So I started putting regular pioneering. I didn't have to quit. They fired me. Because I wouldn't work for 4 days anymore. Well, they didn't fire me. They laid me off. But anyone with half a brain knows that it's fired. So the point is, the point of setting specific goals. You can illustrate, you go into the airlines ticket booth and say, I want to purchase a ticket. What's the clerk going to say? What's your destination? I want to purchase a ticket. What's your destination? If you leave it up to her, you might want to go to Alaska, you're going to Florida. So we need to be specific. Set goals that we can reach. Set intermediate ones. Small goals, they encourage us. When we reach those goals, they encourage us that we can reach the larger one also. There's thousands of people who are regular pioneers and doing other things who are doing things as Jehovah's servers, using all they have to his glory. But Jehovah knows that we're imperfect, we need help, and so we give century there, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a mountain. And one of the things a voice on the cloud said, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Well, they did. But he doesn't speak to us that way today. How does he? In Hebrews chapter 10, notice the encouragement we receive here if we want to be holy by Jehovah. Hebrews chapter 10. He has an organization, like back in the nation of Israel's day. He dealt with them through that organization, the Mosaic law, the elders and so forth. Before that, it was dealt with each individual family who wanted to do his will through the family head. So Jehovah always deals with people in an organized manner, and he does not sidestep that arrangement. So here in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, he says, "Let us hold fast the public declaration of our hope without wavering, for he is faithful that promised." When I think of holding fast, I always think of being on a cruise, falling over the side, and someone throws you a lifeline. How do you grab it? Finger and thumb? No, you get both hands on it, hanging on for dear life. And that's what he says, hold fast the public declaration. Why? It means life to those who will respond and life to ourselves. We hold fast to it. The more we share the truth with others, the deeper it goes in our own hearts, and it inspires us to want to do more. Verse 24, another aid, he says, "Consider one another to incite to love and fine works, not forsaking the gathering ourselves together as some have the custom." But encouraging one another, and all the more so as you behold the day drawing near. So we come to the meetings with the attitude of, what can I contribute? Not what can I get out of it? What can I contribute? Everyone has that attitude built up. Because we're thinking of others. Here's an example of a sister who wanted to attend the memorial. Lived in a South American country in an isolated village. Her husband was an unbeliever. She had a son and a daughter, and she had no money. So she worked overtime for an entire year to get the money to rent a dugout canoe, to paddle down the river to the Atlantic Ocean, out on the ocean, and back up the next river to the nearest congregation so she could attend the memorial. Then after the memorial, back in the canoe, down the river, up across the Atlantic, and back up the other one. Stopped only for rest. 21 hours of round trip, and she was 4 months pregnant. She appreciated the importance of attending the meetings, and she wanted to be there. She let nothing stand in her way. She used what she had to glorify God. So unified action is possible by being instructed by Jehovah through his organizational arrangement, sharing the truth with others. Jesus set the prime example of that in Hebrews chapter 12. The 11th chapter is all the many examples of ancient people who served Jehovah, glorified him with all they had. They were faithful in that regard. And so they set an example of faith. Well, here in Hebrews chapter 12, it speaks about that great cloud of witnesses. And the end of the verse says, "Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, as we look intently at the chief agent and perfecter of our faith, Jesus. As for the joy that was set before him, he endured a torture stake, despising shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. As indeed, consider closely the one who's endured such contrary talk by sinners against their own interest. Why? That you may not get tired and give out your souls." So just think of that. Jesus, in his pre-human existence, the spokesman for Jehovah, he created all things with his Father. And Jehovah says, "I'd like to have you go to the earth and be a ransom to buy back what I've lost." That was the joy he had. Oh, by the way, you're going to be mistreated and killed. Jesus said, "Whatever you will, Father, I'll do." He had joy in doing that, knowing that he was doing his Father's will. So he set that pattern again for us, the primary example of worshiping Jehovah, doing all he can. In Luke chapter 21, he gives us another help that Jehovah's given us, privilege that we have. 21 verse 34, said, but pay attention to yourselves that your hearts never become weighed down with overeating and heavy drinking and anxieties of life. That, he said, not starvation, he said overeating and heavy drinking. Anxieties of life is taking care of our actual needs. They can weigh us down if we don't keep them in check, keep them in balance. He said, because otherwise the day will be upon us like a snare. A snare is a trap that animals don't see. It catches them just like that. You know, it's like I always think of that illustration of the system. You've got to have the latest this, that, and the other thing. I think of how to catch a monkey. They take a box and drill a hole in it and put a banana in it. The monkey looks in, sticks his hand and grabs the banana. He can't get his hand back out. He got caught of his own volition. And that's the way the system is. If we're not careful, it will trap us because of what we do. So we need to be aware of that and stand firm against it. Verse 36, he says, keep awake then, all the time making supplication that you may succeed in escaping all these things that are destined to occur and in standing before the Son of Man. Yes, the devil's system can beat us down if we let it. But if we draw close to Jehovah, sharing the truth with others to the fullest extent we possibly can with that precious privilege he's given us, it will prevent that from occurring. So, our relationship with Jehovah, James 4:8 says, draw close to God, he'll draw close to you. So Jehovah has made the provision, we reach out to get it, he blesses our effort. So our relationship with Jehovah personally depends upon us. What am I doing to build that relationship? So, we've seen that Jehovah is not glorified because the devil blinds people, ways we can glorify with all we have, and probably our circumstances are different from those in the first century, but still we can glorify with all we have by changing our circumstances if we can. So I just think rewards will be ours right now if we do that. The reward of knowing that we're worshiping or glorifying the only one worthy of it, and following the example of Jesus. Here's a point about worshiping Jehovah with all we have. We could draw close to him. A 71-year-old pioneer sister in the Philippines pioneered for 31 years with little income. She said, I was able to provide for my needs, pioneer work, and never felt weakened spiritually. It's like King David said, I used to be a young man, now I'm old. I've never seen a righteous one begging for bread nor his offspring. Doesn't mean we would be down low on provisions. Jehovah knows what we need. And the thing is, he teaches us the difference between what we want and what we need. Before we went to Tennessee, I raised livestock. I'd complain if I didn't have steak at least 3 times a week. After I got to Tennessee, because of little income, I was happy to eat. Sounds funny, but it's the truth. Here's glorifying Jehovah with all we have means we maintain our standing with him, and according to our circumstances, our heart will move us to praise him in some way every day, by example, by speaking, and so forth. So, even now, we can anticipate the life in a righteous new world, paradise. And can you see yourself there in your family, congregation, other friends? Look at your hand, what do you see? Well, turn to the 119th Psalm. That gives you the answer. Verse 109. The psalmist said, my soul, or my life, is in my palm or hand, constantly. But your law I have not forgotten. So if we avail ourselves of all Jehovah's provisions, share the truth with others, apply it in our life, then we will be assured of living in that righteous new world. The Apostle Paul said in Romans 11:12, he said, Philip's translation said, I make as much of my ministry as I possibly can. So ask yourself, am I doing that? Am I glorifying God with all that I have?
Thank you, Brother Christensen. We certainly appreciated what it means to glorify God with all going to have the watchtower, and Brother H is going to conduct that for us.
We'd like to welcome you all to stay, and if it's practical for you, we invite you to stand so we can sing a song of praise to our God Jehovah. Seek God for your deliverance, song number 133, based on Zephaniah chapter 2 and verse 3. Song 133.